All right, so here's our high poly sitting in the same space as our low poly, or our rough sculpt here. The rough sculpt is kind of in the way, and I'd like it to be out of the way. So I'm just going to use clay tubes, and everywhere that geometry is, and I've got my Z-sphere here, I'm going to go ahead and we'll tap A, and then delete topo. I don't need that anymore. So back to the rough sculpt, and I'm just going to use my clay tubes brush. Whoops, I just fun fact. So I'm holding Alt, trying to sculpt on this guy, right? Trying to push all this geo out of the way. But if you hold Alt and click on a subtool, you'll switch to that subtool. So ZBrush can occasionally get a little bit confused about what it is you're asking for. If you notice that, just go ahead and pause what you're doing and make sure you've got the correct subtool selected. So I can see that I actually wanted my stuff to come out a little bit further on the outside. Whoops, but because this again is very simple to edit, I can just make some changes. So we've got symmetry turned on. I'm going to go to the move brush, and I can just pull these few points out. It doesn't really matter what's happening under here so long as I don't cause too much trouble for the geo that is visible. We can start to get this stuff, and maybe we have a little bit more of a transition. And because everything is set up to be let's just a ring here, I can pretty easily come over and we'll do an insert. We'll add an edge all the way around, and then I'm going to do an inflate on this edge. Or actually, I don't know if there is an inflate on this edge. So what we'll do instead is I'm going to add another edge, and I'm going to put this on its own little poly group. So we'll hop over to select lasso, invert the selection, Control W. So now this is on its own poly group, and I can definitely inflate the poly group. So we'll go to poly group all for the target, and just kind of poof it out a little bit. And you can see this got selected too. In this case, it's not really going to make that much of a difference. And I'm going to throw, I think I'll do just one little, I want to crease one of these edges. You can crease them both. I'll show you what that looks like here. If I just go to crease poly groups, but it starts to feel a little bit faceted to me. I'm not really getting like a hard surface vibe. It just feels kind of low poly. So I really only need one of these. I'm going to get rid of this edge here. So insert, hold Alt, and away it goes. Control W to put everything back on one poly group. And now I have this extra feature running around the outside of the geo, which is kind of cool. I can add another thing here if I wanted. We'll add another edge, just like what we had a moment ago. I'm going to do an invert, and then we'll put it on its own poly group. So with this geo here, on its little strip here, I'm going to go ahead and do an inset poly group all, which will give me something like that. And now I can do an inflate. I'm not sure why I put this edge there. That might have been a setting in my inset. Let me just kind of double check here. I don't know why that would have happened. I don't normally see that. It's possible I've got some extra edges here that I'm not aware of. I seriously doubt it, but just to make sure, I'm going to go to modify topology, and we'll do world points. I don't think that's going to fix it. Yeah, it's not going to fix it. But in this case, just to demonstrate this, it's not a big deal. I'm now going to go to inflate, and we will go the other direction if it'll let me. So it's saying I've got. Whenever you see this, it just means something happened with the right. That issue is non-symmetrical, operation canceled. So I have symmetry turned on, but it says my geometry is not symmetrical, which means just somewhere there's a piece that's mathematically different. It's off a tiny bit. The very simple solution is we'll just do a mirror and weld, which is here in geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld, and hopefully that will have fixed it. Let's give it a shot. Yeah. So now I can push it in, and it looks like it's not welded. I'm just going to back out of this. This should not be that complicated. Do a smooth subdivision. We'll just try this again. Control W, put everything in one poly group. I'm going to isolate the strip. I want to do an inset so I get a little bit of an angled wall going in. You could totally just push this in. I'll show you what that looks like. So if I go to, we'll do Q-mesh here. Or extrude is probably safer. Q-mesh will weld it to anything on the other side. I'm not necessarily sure I want that to happen. So, and we'll set the target to polygroup all. So that's kind of what I was trying to get. but with a little bit more of an angle on the wall. So I'm going to just crease my polygroups, and you can sort of see how easily we can... something strange going on there. Let me go ahead and do a mirror and weld. That was on the other side. So we'll just flip all of the geo using deformation, and then another mirror and weld. There we go. So every now and again you'll run into problems, but it's never something that's terrible to solve. Let's throw a little bevel on here. And I'm going to get rid of this edge here. So we'll do, what is that? Make sure I'm on the edge one. Insert, hold Alt. So all kinds of things you can do to quickly and easily add detail if your geometry is set up correctly. So if I wanted to make sure that the geometry that I was creating on the other sides here matched up cleanly with my existing low poly, my existing retop here, the easiest way to do it is to hop into low poly. I'm going to clean the scaffolding mesh up a little tiny bit just so I have a better understanding about what's going on with what the edges look like. Something like that. So if I was going to make a piece to kind of fit over here, see if I can do this more quickly than the last one. All you got to do is line your geometry up with what the low poly is that you're trying to match. So I'm just going to kind of do something like this, and then we can fill in the retop. Maybe something like that. This face here is likely to be a non-planar face, so it may need to be cleaned up a little bit after the fact, but that's a little easier to do once you're at the poly phase. Because with the retop here, we're kind of stuck with what the scaffolding geo will allow. So again, you can see I'm just making an effort to kind of stay in quads, kind of keep my geometry relatively clean and orderly, and my edges here line up. And I'll go up a little bit further. We'll do like one more, just to kind of prove the point. All right, tap solo. I'm going to hit A to go to my preview mesh, make it a poly mesh 3D. We got our new subtool. Hop back over to where we were. We can see we've got 3 now. I'm going to go to append. There's our new geo. I've still got my Zsphere selected. Make sure you select your new geo before you start sculpting. I do that all the time. I'm going to tap A here and hit delete topo to clean up the Zsphere and select the new geometry. And we'll just do most of that same stuff. I'm going to go ahead and, in this case, I actually want this to be visible so I can get a sense for what the extrusion thicknesses are and all the rest of it. So I'll just turn the visibility off on those two and hit solo. So now I can see a little bit more closely. And I'm going to just position these up a little bit closer to those verts where they actually kind of line up with the surface a bit. And this is just eyeballing at this point, obviously. Try to get the planar position kind of correct there. And I haven't done any extrusion yet. At this point, the simpler the geometry, the better, because I just have to make these big changes, and if I had a second layer to worry about, it would just make this process a bit more challenging. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and give it an extrusion. We can go in, and I'm going to do a flip. And let's see, so here I'll just go ahead and, now I'm going to drop this into Dynamic Sub D, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. And so let's say I'm going to want some of these corners, looks like I inserted an edge on accident. Keep your eyes out for that kind of thing. I'm going to slide this down. One of the things that, I don't know if I'm going to have time to talk about this, or if it's even really appropriate, it probably is. But there are some general principles that I try to follow with my design, like my shape language. I try to stay away from 90-degree angles. This is obviously being rounded, isn't really reading as a 90-degree angle, and that would be fine. But if you can just put a little angle on stuff, it can help a lot. So I'm going to use, in this case, slide. And I'll just slide that all the way down, and now we can do some creasing. So we'll just crease some of these corners. don't want to crease anything in here that doesn't have a corresponding creased edge on that side. And right now, there's nothing over there that's creased. So you can see where I did crease it, it's pulled away from the geo, but that's not a big deal. This is the stuff that I was mostly trying to balance out. Alright, and we can do somewhat of a similar trick here. I can try insetting the top and putting extrusion on there, but you get some weird artifacts frequently when you do that. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So we'll go to Inset. Right, so all of this stuff here where it's split, that's all kind of bad news, right? Like what I would like to do, this is kind of where I'm going with it, put an inflate on there, is you get that bevel around the corner there. So now if I do a crease polygroup, we start to get something that looks like this, where you've got these two panels coming together, but there's a little canyon or whatever, but the geo is fighting me. So the other way to do that, I know I'm a little bit over time, but this is fairly simple, is you add an edge all the way around there, put this stuff onto its own polygroup. Let me hit solo so we can see for sure what's going on. So isolate that strip, hit Control W, we'll show everything, and I'm going to inflate, and we'll do a crease polygroup. So you can see we get that same nice transition. We don't just have two flat panels coming together without too much trouble. So now I'm just going to set my crease level stuff here. So I think this was either 2 or 3, and then we just need to go over it. So the lower this is, the softer your geometry is going to be. So if I take this, it's sitting at 3, and you can kind of pay attention to this area right here. If I drop that to like a 2 or something, you can see everything just gets a little bit softer. So depending on what it is that you're looking for and just how sharp your edges need to be, this crease level here is going to dictate that. But you can see here our curvature up until we get to this area up here where it starts to sort of step away. Curvature matches certainly well enough. Could always be a little bit better. But yeah, that's round 2 of our upper gorilla lip hard surface thing here, and maybe we'll do one more in the next video, and then hopefully that'll be all you need to have seen to get the gist of the idea.